There's something wrong with my title. It could be one or the other. A head or the entire R&D department.
Well, welcome back to HODL Crypto Asset Conference. My name is Sriraj Deshmukh and I will be your host for this session. Before we kickstart this session, I would like to thank our title partners Zebpay and CoinDCX, powered by CoinSwitch, brought to you by BitDNS, Platinum partner Facebook, Gold partner Geotis, and Bronze partner Obi Global. We are now moving on to the next session on socio-economic impact of crypto in India. I would like to introduce you to the moderator of this session, Ms. Mimansa Verma, Finance and Economy Reporter at Quartz India. Next, I would like to welcome the panelists, Mr. Douglas Arner, Kerry Holdings Professor in Law, the University of Hong Kong, Mr. Karthik Iyer, Founder and Head of Research at BlockchainMonk, Mr. Prashanth Irudayaraj, Head of R&D.
What's a typo?
Our digital tokens over the past few years, especially in India, there have been quite many roadblocks, starting with legality, extreme volatility, speculation, and of course, the environmental impact. We have seen it in the past that every technology takes its own time to set foot in the ground, be it mobile phones or the internet. Having said that, it is worth a mention that India now ranks second on crypto adoption index globally. But all of this brings us to one important question, that what is going to be the socio-economic impact of cryptocurrency in India in the coming years? So my first question for the panel is that, do you think cryptocurrency plays a pivotal role in the globalization ahead in the coming years? Anyone can start.
I guess I'll go. Yes, absolutely. I mean, we're already seeing massive impacts of cryptocurrency in places like El Salvador. India obviously is adopting it fairly quickly now that regulations are improving, or transparency and just the optimism around regulations are improving. And I think in the next few years, we'll see a lot of innovation around kind of bringing in people who have not traditionally benefited from the financial system. At the moment, or at least until now, we've seen that Bitcoin has kind of like unbanked the banked. And I think going forward, though, we'll see more of actually banking the unbanked. So I'm looking forward to that.
All right. That the first and foremost challenge for Indian regulators right now is to create a framework for cryptocurrencies that is inclusive of everyone in the country. So that brings me to the question for Mr. Douglas Arner, that is there an ideal framework for regulating cryptocurrency in India? As in, can we draw a parallel between India and Singapore or any of the emerging markets, so that India can have an easier adoption of cryptocurrency going ahead?
Thanks for that. And I think going forward, this is actually one of the most important questions. In other words, in some ways, one of the biggest risks for crypto markets going forward is bad players. And regulation is a really important mechanism to try to address some of those problems before they happen, ideally. But when things do happen, to have mechanisms of redress. And all of this is really core to the trust and confidence that you need for people to increase their usage and to see the real benefits of the technology. Now, from the standpoint of regulation, everyone is at a pretty early stage all over the world in trying to figure out best approaches. We've seen approaches ranging from very facilitative to very prohibitive. And I think increasingly the trend is to focus on ways to bring them into the protective network. In other words, think about consumer issues, think about technology issues, rather than focusing on trying to limit uses, limit approaches. And so I think if we think about this, what we're seeing is very often approaches which focus on the specific areas of risk around perhaps financial uses, around potential fraud uses, around cybersecurity uses. And for me, the real key to a regulatory framework is figuring out where those risks lie and focusing on those aspects. So the unfortunate news is at the moment, there isn't any single ideal mechanism. There probably isn't even a consensus amongst countries. Everyone is very much feeling their ways forward.
All right. All right.
Mimansa, sorry,
Yeah.
if I could just weigh into this question, because I must
Yes.
confess, I looked at a lot of the questions that you raised, and I have no idea written in front of some of them, because I actually wouldn't know, because I don't trade in cryptocurrency, and I think the only contribution that I have had in the field of cryptocurrency is having argued that case before the Supreme Court, which struck down the RBI ban. So that's really the reason. That's probably one of the catalysts why we have cryptocurrency in India, but that's the limited role that I have played. And I think this is an issue that I can weigh in on. And there is something very fundamental that all of us have to understand. And the fundamental aspect from a legal perspective is, what is cryptocurrency? We tried to argue this before the Supreme Court, where we tried to tell them that, England had taken the view that it was property, and following common law, that's what you should consider. You know how Singapore deals with it. You've got one decision in Singapore which classifies it as property. But then again, you have the MAS, which is the Monetary Authority of Singapore, which has come out with rules and regulations to govern cryptocurrency. In the United States, you've seen decisions and there are decisions which even call it a security. Once you get to the bottom of figuring out what it is, you will certainly have regulators trying to regulate it. And I agree. I mean, you can't have regulations which need to limit it. You need to have regulations which are productive, proactive, to take care of consumer interests. But you first need to fundamentally define what it is.
Right. Makes sense, because we have cryptocurrency bill coming up in the winter session. So there's a lot of conversation around that as well. But coming back to the socio-economic impact, so one does not need to buy one Bitcoin or one Ethereum. They can buy a part of it for as low as 100 or 500 rupees. But the flip side with CBDC and all the other blockchain-based solutions is that they're not as comprehensible at this stage by large part of the crowd. For example, the rural areas. So do you think it is likely to widen the gap between rural and urban India, and to what extent does the rural penetration of cryptocurrency look like? If Prashanth sir could answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is definitely widening the gap, because right now the people benefiting the most from cryptocurrencies are basically the people who are highly educated, live in urban settings. I would say the majority of people in crypto right now are probably like white male Silicon Valley, right? Which is not very different from white male Wall Street, which was what it has been for the last 200 years, probably. But that's what we have to work towards as an industry. That's the challenge now. Is we've got this technology. The technology is mimicking the technology of the past, which is derivatives, stock markets. DEXs are basically on-chain stock markets, right? And what we as an industry have to do now is go back to a first principles approach and say, well, we've got this hammer, we've got these problems. How do we take this first principles way of solving them, where we kind of don't look at the past and we just create something completely new. And that's what we're trying to do at R&D and Zebpay.
Okay, but how do you suggest that is possible? Because right now the financial literacy, or so to say the digital literacy in India, is not as significant as one would have expected in the rural areas. So do you think cryptocurrency has the potential to, like you said before, bank the unbanked? And what are the steps that you suggest going forward to bridge that gap?
Well, I mean, I'm a big proponent of muscle memory. You just got to get people to start using it. And so we are active. We just launched last week this thing called Solar BTC, which is an experimental product that is going to help rural Indian women mine cryptocurrency using the power of the sun. And it solves for many things. It solves for the the renewable energy aspect of Bitcoin, which Elon Musk has talked about. It solves for the make in India part of it. Most of Bitcoin is made abroad, and then we pay for it and it comes to India. And then it solves for getting people involved at the rural level in cryptocurrency in a way that they can tangibly see an impact on their lives, right? So that's one experimental project. We are actively working on developing a DAO that can be more for social enterprise, where more people can participate in a distributed way. That is still ongoing research, but everything that we do is focused on getting people to start using this and have a benefit immediately. Like with Solar BTC, the benefit is immediate. They're getting income. So if you're a rural individual, you don't have to know what cryptocurrency is. You just need to know that, hey, if I put this thing in and I start mining, I'm getting an income, and then you can decide later whether you want to dive into it further or not.
All right, that's quite interesting. So my question to Karthik is that it is believed that cryptocurrency ecosystem in India will provide employment, but the flip side is again it also cuts out the trusted middlemen who used to see fiat currency transaction traditionally. So how is that going to work out? Is that not and what kind of model do you suggest to increase employment opportunities in the cryptocurrency industries? And so to say, if this is going to be the future of finance, we'll have to look at how the students are being taught about this new industry, and is there a plan to should there be a plan to introduce a curriculum at college level or at school level to prepare the new generation for this?
So Mimansa, I mean, I run a company called BlockchainMonk, which is one of the oldest companies in the blockchain space, but I'm also part of the P2P Foundation. And I don't know if you know what the P2P Foundation is. Have you heard of the P2P Foundation?
Yes, I have.
So that's where everything started, right? So if you search for Satoshi Nakamoto, the only place Satoshi has a web presence is the P2P Foundation. That's where the whole thing started. So I gave a talk in India back in 2013, 2014 in an event called NASCOM DSEI with the father of Bitcoin in India. So there's a guy named Kamesh Muparaju who started the first exchange in India. So if you wanted to buy Bitcoins in India in 2013, the only place you could buy Bitcoins was called BTCX India, right? And then he launched ETHX India, and then he closed everything down during the crackdowns back in 2017. So I've literally seen, when most people in the crypto space in India were in their diapers, right, back in 2013, 14, I've seen them basically set up the company, evolve and all that. I still remember the conversation with from Melbourne. He was at the NASCOM event and he was demonstrating his exchange in one-page thing where you can just buy Bitcoin. And so I've basically seen the space evolve over the last 12, 13 years. In fact, the biggest crypto site in the world is called CoinMarketCap. So if you put my name Karthik Iyer in CoinMarketCap, they just story on me being one of the oldest guys in the space. So let me be open with you, right? The world economy is about $74 trillion. 7 trillion of the 74 trillion are rent-seeking intermediaries, middlemen, right? So the real value of blockchain is disintermediation, trustless disintermediation. So all these intermediaries will go away, right? And we live in a society that's based on something called a technopoly, where technology monopolizes everything else. It doesn't matter what culture you come from. It doesn't matter what religion you believe in, right? So capitalism is about maximizing profit, is about increasing efficiencies. Ronald Coase, who's the author of the theory of the firm, says that firms exist to maximize economies of scale and reduce transaction costs. In fact, the first private enterprise was the British East India Company, which was set up by the Queen because it was very efficient in conducting colonization activities in India, right? And the Dutch East India Company came, and everybody else came. So this is what it's all about. The whole game is about the $7 trillion of rent-seeking intermediaries like SWIFT. You have MasterCard. You have payment processors, banks. Everything will go. everything will go. And this is from somebody who's seen the space for 12 years. So if you put my name Karthik Iyer, Future of Money, there was an interview from Fox News' Heather Wesson from 2013 where I talk about this, right? So I'm an early investor in Ethereum, so literally most of these guys when they were in diapers, right? Literally when their kids running around, absolutely not knowing what these things were, right? I'd either met them or mentored them or one of those things. So, and I've seen this in India. So I don't think India should be afraid of change, right? I think we should embrace change. And I mean, the Vedic elders of India were, the creators of civilization, right? You go anywhere in Asia, it's all, literally pretty much all the practices in Japan, China, Indonesia, Vietnam is all ancient Vedic Indian practices. So I think, India should embrace this. I mean, because we should be like the Vishwa Guru, right? And rightfully so, when we have 700 million people by 35, and we have literally Indians running most of the big tech companies anywhere in the world. So we are the human capital, right? But we cannot be afraid of change. We cannot be afraid of the idea that we have a huge population, won't be able to cater to them. We need to reskill them. We need to upskill them. We need to, embrace automation. There's also a talk I gave on UBI on how we could capitalize blockchain cryptocurrencies or UBI, right? So we're going into a new paradigm of abundance. There's a lot of technologies that are coming in energy and everything else. I think we're talking about a post-scarcity world in the next 10 years. And so I think that's why I think there are many different universes that are coming together. So if one needs to meaningfully speak about crypto, one really needs to understand what's going on, from a civilizational context. So that's my very long answer to your very short question.
No problem. So actually, the less said is actually the more said is actually less, because there's so much ambiguity around cryptocurrency in India that people are not so. Except the regulators, I think there's wider acceptance among people than the regulators. So yeah,
No, but I
that's
think the
quite
regulators are
insightful.
doing their job. So let me also tell you, I'm now an official advisor to the Royal Monetary Authority of Bhutan, right? So I'm currently
Okay.
working with the Bhutanese government to frame their crypto policy framework, right? So I do weekly calls with the RMA on formulating their policy. I've in the past worked with Gibraltar. I've had interactions with the MAS here in Singapore. So, I mean, the regulators are doing the job. I think the Indian government's done a phenomenal job in making sure that the average Indian who makes, like, let's say, $300, $400 a month in salaries is not going to lose a shirt by investing in a scam project, right? Some 60-70% of these projects are all scam. I mean, there's no foundation to any of these projects. About 30-40 of them are world-changing projects. But the 60-70% of them are scams. And then people are going to lose a lot of money, and they've lost a lot of money, right? I've seen the 2011 crash. I've seen the 2013 crash. I've seen the 2018 crash. I'm going to see the 2022 crash that's coming, right? So this is the value of hindsight when you've literally spent 10, 15 years in the industry, right?
Right. Okay. So one of the major concerns around cryptocurrency is the vast use of energy. What are the prospects of using green energy to mine crypto in India? Because there are some people who are mining in India, though we don't have the data available. But is it doable? Is it doable to mine cryptocurrency through green energy? And do you think that crypto can solve climate change, the problem of climate change in India?
Should I take that?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, absolutely. So obviously, you can use renewable energy to mine crypto. The problem is it's not economical as yet, because renewable energy, obviously, the technology is more expensive than fossil fuels. Fossil fuels also have this implicit kind of discount because we don't count the carbon generated into the atmosphere, right? We don't charge for that, and so fossil fuels are cheaper. So right now, I would say probably like 90% or more of Bitcoin is produced using coal. And to move this to renewable energy, we're going to have some different kind of economic incentives that make up for the difference between the price of a watt of energy from coal versus solar. So that's the difficult problem we have to solve now. We have to make mining using renewable energy more economical than mining using fossil fuels. But from a technology standpoint, it's definitely doable. We just set up our first solar BTC system in Virar, and it is currently mining using solar power. So we did that with a bunch of people who had never built a mining rig before and had never done any mining, and they were able to set it up and get it going.
Probably worth
Right,
mentioning
because
that outside the Bitcoin context, we're seeing the evolution of other models that are much less energy intensive, particularly if we take the Ether context and shifting to an entirely different sort of model, which doesn't address the problems in the Bitcoin context, where we are really looking at efficiency concepts. But in a number of the other chains, we're seeing alternative mechanisms that do not have these energy issues. And I think that's really important for the sector going forward.
because yes, Prashanth.
I will add though. So I think the Bitcoin context is still important because in the Bitcoin context, the energy use is a feature. It's not a bug, right? It is important that Bitcoin uses energy, and so making that renewable is actually very good for the space. And also, it's just the network effects of Bitcoin are tremendous. So yeah, but you're right. Yes, Ethereum is moving to proof of stake, which is a much more efficient system. And you can definitely do much better cryptocurrency mining or processing using that and renewable energy.
Okay, because if the government is planning to, government is planning to use CBDC. I'm not sure if the government is planning to do that, but there have been reports that CBDC can be used in all of these government campaigns, the government schemes that they want to roll out. For example, this employment scheme or other such schemes. So if they are planning to use CBDC and blockchain based solution at such a vast level, I think the clean energy is the only way out at this point of time. I think India should look at that option as well, rather than mining from fossil fuels or
So
non-renewable
Mimansa, when you
energy.
say CBDCs are typically very centralized. So they are just like a database. Like if you look at the Chinese DCEP, which is the Digital Currency Electronic Payment Project by the People's Bank of China, it's a very highly centralized database. I mean, so when you talk about Bitcoin, it uses a mining mechanism called proof of work, which is a very energy intensive thing because you have to solve a very complex compute problem, which requires massive amounts of compute power. So when I used to mine Bitcoins back in 2009, I could do it with a laptop and I'd get 50 Bitcoins for mining one block. The block reward is 50. So none of the CBDCs would use proof of work because there's no reason, because the reason why you have proof of work is because you want to decentralize. The whole point of doing CBDC is to centralize power. So the wallets would be KYC'd because you have capital controls, right? China banned Bitcoin because they're afraid that people take money out of China via Bitcoins, right? They cracked on all the exchanges, all the miners. Overnight, they all sent to America. Literally everybody is now in the Midwest where the power is cheap and they're all mining, and all these new companies did IPOs like Mara and everybody else. So CBDCs are highly centralized technologies, right? So they basically build it on some type of private chain, which would either be built indigenously, or it would be something like the Sand Dollar, which was built by my mentee, Vinay Mohan used to work for Consensus, right? So I don't think energy would be a big issue, but Bitcoin mining energy is a very big challenge. But I mean, we're talking about energy of today. You know, we're talking about 40 years of the oil mafia, literally pushing oil down our throats. But now it's all going to nuclear, right? There's a hydrogen fuel cell that's coming up. There's solar. There's nuclear. There are things, very exotic things like lifters that are coming, which are liquid, thorium reactors, which are called lifters. So the tons of new things that are coming, which will cause energy abundance for the next 10, 15 years. So energy won't be a huge issue like it was for the last 40 years. Because scarcity was created artificially. This is not a natural state, right? So we have technologies to create abundance, but they're not just let out. It's like the movie Who Killed the Electric Car. GM had an electric car in 1994, right? Yeah. But we're getting electric cars in 2024 because the oil cartels didn't want us to live in a clean green thing. Now the polar caps are melting. New York's underwater. Bombay's underwater. Maldives is going to be underwater. There's going to be like a couple of million refugees coming down to India, right? Now we're waking up. Cognitive dissonance. So this is the problem with humanity. So this is why we need to understand this from a civilization context, right? Crypto is not disconnected from the rest of the world. It's not connected from the rest of humanity. So
Right. So that brings me to my next question about exports, about boosting Indian exports. So, do you think India can leverage the fact that cryptocurrency can be used and traded across all jurisdictions, given that India trades with multiple countries and in high volume? So, do you think the right set of regulations from authorities may help exports of Indian businesses and entrepreneurs with minimal bureaucratic hindrances?
Let me take the regulatory side of this, and I'll leave the business side to the people who definitely know this industry way more than I do. I'll tell you one of the concerns that we've always had with crypto, and again, I'm going to go back to the one case that I argued, which let crypto come back in, and that was effectively there are foreign exchange regulations which apply. I mean, in India, the Indian rupee is not freely convertible, and whatever you do when you're looking at crypto and you're looking at international trade, foreign exchange regulation can certainly come in and bite you if you flout it. Now, that has to then be meshed with how we actually go and actually work with crypto when it comes to exports. At the current moment, it isn't meshed. I mean, I'll tell you how simplistically we put this out to the Supreme Court when we argued this case. The argument was as simple as this: an Indian individual can take out $250,000 out of India at any given point of time without any questions. You go outside, go to Singapore and buy crypto. Why are you disallowing the person to buying it here? The question was, but there are no limits to this. And we said, yes, but that purchase is done in Indian rupees and francs. Well, frankly, if somebody goes and violates that norm, then you prosecute the person. But that's a simplistic argument. When you bring it into the context of really using it for trade, then you need to have regulations in place which can govern it. And again, those regulations have to bear in mind India's economic state of affairs, and at this current moment, I would say even India's purchasing power parity in relation to what the rupee has, the value of the rupee, the value of the dollar. There are lots of other factors that come into play, and the government will naturally have to take a call on it. But then that said, I mean, as far as the business aspect of it is concerned, I'll leave it to people who know about this.
Well, I mean, I would say that the feature of cryptocurrency is it's borderless. You can pay someone with Bitcoin from India. I mean, you can be in India and you can pay someone in Ecuador instantly. You don't have any government controls. You don't have any issues. It can happen right without any time delay. So the transaction costs of business come down fairly significantly. And if you speed that up, you can just do a lot more. This is one less thing to worry about.
I think that's a really important point, and it's something that everybody recognizes, that transferring money, making payments on a cross-border basis is terrible. It's ridiculously expensive, it's inefficient, it's high risk. In fact, the way the entire system is set up, it excludes a couple of billion people from actually being able to make transfers on a cross-border basis. So basically, we have a system that doesn't work very well. And I think where we're seeing some of the most interesting developments is around using new technologies to basically build better systems. But of course, it does run into some of these tensions around free movement versus capital controls. And in some ways, that's one of the incentives for central bank digital currencies or for regulation, is to bring some element of control back in. But at the same time, I think when you're thinking about cross-border transactions, it's very clear that this is a strong improvement over where we are now. And that is really good for everyone, from the overseas worker who's trying to send money home to the big services tech company to an SME manufacturer somewhere in the countryside. Being able to make and receive payments quicker, more safely, more efficiently, less costly is a tremendous benefit.
Right. Right. So going by that, what is the potential of cryptocurrency industry in terms of contribution to India's GDP? Do you have some sense on that? How much will the cryptocurrency add to the economy, add to the India's GDP?
Well, I mean, it's very simple. I mean, when you look at it, we are moving towards something called the Great Reset, right? I mean, it's a very interesting book called COVID-19, The Great Reset, which I think everybody should read. And I think the fundamental tenets of the Great Reset is about efficiencies, right? Increasing efficiencies. It's about fourth industrial revolution. It's about decentralization, all that. So today it takes T+2 to do settlements between countries, right? When you do transfers. So on blockchain is instant settlement. In the next 4 or 5 years, pretty much everybody will talk about something called as triple entry accounting, right? You have credit, debit, and now you have credit, debit on the blockchain, right? So triple entry accounting will become the new standard of accounting, and there'll be like GAP standards for triple entry accounting. So when countries transact with each other, right, on let's say oil purchases or trade purchases, they would settle between their own chains. They will have things like atomic swaps and instant settlement between chains. So we've done more than 150 projects in the last 10 years, right? Supply chain management, CBDCs. If you put my name Karthik Iyer and then you put a blockchain topic, NFT, CBDC, whatever, there's some keynote somewhere on YouTube in New York or London or Germany or somewhere, right? We've been speaking about it for the last 10, 12 years. So the real value is disintermediation, reducing transaction costs, but increasing massive amounts of efficiencies, and accelerating commerce. Because the speed at which commerce is being done right now, right, is very, very slow compared to what it potentially be. I mean, if you look at the number of people using e-commerce, it's like less than 1% of the world, right? All of that will go into blockchains. And everybody could be a buyer and seller. You don't need huge monolithic companies like Amazon. There are companies that are looking to disrupt the Amazon model through decentralization. So I think that's where the real value is going to come. It's going to come from instant settlements, massive amounts of efficiency, greater auditability and accountability through things like triple entry accounting standards, which nobody's talking about today because most people don't understand, right? I mean, this is why there are many different worlds that are coming in, right? There's economics, there's technology, there's politics, geopolitics, and hence a comprehensive understanding of all these different moving parts is very important, when to basically explain whether this will be a asset for countries or be a hindrance. Because if you use a cryptocurrency, it's going to be disastrous, right? I mean, like you saw in China, massive amounts of capital flight. How do you enforce FATF rules? Let's say I use Zcash using Zcash Knox or Quartz or Wimble. I mean, even if you have the compute power of what a big country like organization like NSA would have, or like say Indian Army CERT would have, I still would not be able to understand what's going on the chain because the whole thing's based on zero knowledge ciphers. So there are huge national security risks in using cryptocurrency for cross-border, which is why cross-border transactions, government to government, will happen on CBDCs, on cross-border atomic swaps. So I mean, it's fairly technical, but there's no way to simplify this, right? So
I'd like to add to that. You mentioned that there could be a downside to the Indian economy, just like there could be a downside to any economy. But I think that, like Karthik mentioned, you'll see the decentralization of highly centralized and profitable industries like Amazon, and possibly the creation of completely new organizations that span borders. So you could have companies that don't have a jurisdiction if they're a DAO. You could have political entities that don't have a jurisdiction. You could also kind of imagine a world in which people kind of decide which organizations they're going to join, or which country they're going to join virtually, right? So, and how does that affect the Indian economy? Well, it could reduce the the production in the economy, but it could also make it easier for people to transact within the economy within India. It could redefine what does it mean to be India, They could redefine what does it mean to be the US. I'll give you an example. In the ICO boom. The ICO boom kind of showed a completely different way of creating organizations, where you get all your money up front, and then you launch a product, and then you decentralize the protocol, right? Which is a completely different way of doing an organization now, where you build a centralized entity, then you sell shares in it over time. You keep building value, you sell more shares. But here, all of this happens up front, and then the people who hold the tokens decide how this organization is going to grow.
Right, right. So this brings us to the end of the session. Just to wrap it up, what is the sense on cryptocurrency and regulation of official digital currency bill 2021? Any specifics that needs to be taken care of? If Nakul could shed some light on that.
Well, I have one word for it. In its current state, it's a retrograde step. I mean, really, that's not what the bill should be about. What you need to really do is embrace what people want. And if people want cryptocurrency, which is not just central currency, that's what you need to go towards. Of course, you should regulate it, but don't prescribe and don't stop people from doing what they really want to do. We should live in as free an economy as we can.
Right.
So
the government is
Mimansa,
going
just wanted to add
yes.
to what Nakul said. I think he made a very, very good point. So I grew up in Coimbatore in the south of India, right? Pretty much everybody I played cricket with in Coimbatore has an American passport now. None of my cousins, none of my friends live behind India. India's GDP per capita is now lower than Bangladesh. I think it will become potentially lower than Sri Lanka or other countries if we don't get our act together. So I think, it's very, very, we had a very serious situation, right? COVID's basically hammered the economy down. I think the government should put together a panel of people who actually understand the stuff. They should listen to the voice of the people, because the most important form of capital right now is not finance capital. It's not natural resources, it's human capital. And a whole generation of people have left, right? I call it India's lost generation. Another generation of people will leave if we don't get our act together. And that, for me, as a very proud Indian, I still hold my Indian passport. I lived in Norway and Sweden for a decade. I still hold my Indian passport. I go and stand in every embassy for a visa, right? I mean, although various countries have given me their passports, they said, why don't you take our citizenship or PR? I said, no, I'm very proud Indian. And so this is my biggest fear for India as a very proud Indian, right? We can't continue to screw around like we've been screwing around for the last 20 years. So with that, I will thank you for giving me the opportunity to express my views.
Just for some final thoughts, what are the major societal changes that you see happening in the cryptocurrency space in the next 10 years? Say next 10 years. Yeah.
For me, the real tension for this decade is going to be between centralization and decentralization. And we're seeing trends both ways. And I think it's going to be one of the biggest issues in countries and in the world is the end result. And I think at this stage, the end result is by no means clear.
Right. Prashanth, you would want to add something to that? Your final thoughts on where do you see the Indian society going with cryptocurrency in next 10 years?
I think, for example, banking and finance in India will become more local. I think you'll have smaller banks, you'll have more community-based organizations, because if you have this global infrastructure like Ethereum on which to create derivatives and transfer value, you can build a derivative in your bedroom. You don't need a big bank like HSBC or Citibank. And so you could potentially see villages having like their own little banking system built on Ethereum that's unique to that village and unique to the needs of that village.
Right. So, Sriraj, it brings us to the end of the panel discussion. Thank you so much to all the panelists for giving their valuable time, and thank you so much for having me as well. It was truly insightful. Being a reporter, it actually makes sense for me to engage with a lot of people, and definitely this has been a wonderful experience. So, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, everyone, for the engaging
Thanks, everyone.
discussion. And a special thanks to all the panelists and the moderator for being here with us today and making this possible. And another thanks goes out to all the delegates as well who are here with us today. Thank you so much, everyone, and stay tuned as we'll be back with the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you.